these words. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you for your powerful praying. Now we're going to invite Jake Hawkins to come up and tell us a little bit about the ministry of the Gideons, as we're in support of the Gideons here at Emmanuel today. Well, every day, but more so today.
All right. Are we on?
You bet.
Man, look at all you people. Anybody out there, good morning, those that don't know me, you've seen me around, which probably don't know my name. I'm Jake Hawkins with the Gideons. I'm representing the Gideon ministry today. Is there anybody out there that doesn't know what the Gideons are or what they do? That's good. I'll dispense with all that jargon then. We'll just go right straight into what has been going on with the Gideons this past year or so. The COVID pandemic has made 20 and 21 tough for everyone, including the Gideons. The Gideon ministry was affected in several ways. Our national and international travelers and trainers were not able to travel. They were doing what they could by going viral. Kids were then able to do what we call blitzes, and that's what we call standing on the corners and handing out Bibles and so forth. Here in the U.S. and foreign countries, our national and regional conventions and trainings were canceled as well. Locally, the Gideons were not able to get into churches to tell folks about our ministry. Some isolated cases like this, other churches have taken up collections for us without us being there. We were not able to stand on the street corners and hand out Bibles to the junior high, high school, and college students as we have in past years. We were not allowed into motels and hotels to replace and put Bibles in the hotels anymore. The fact is, they removed all printed materials, including the Gideon Bibles, until this pandemic is over. We were not able to hold our annual Pastor's Appreciation Day and luncheon that we usually, but we did send out a Starbucks gift card to all our pastors, so that they at least got a little something. On the bright side, here in the year 21, some churches took up offerings on their own for the Gideons. We have an individual that usually gives us a very large donation, and we're supposed to have matching funds for it. And that has always happened for us, so we're grateful for that. People are using the Gideon cards. Our Bible chairman came up with an idea to give appreciation packets to our first line responders, the police and fire departments. These packets consisted of 2 snack bars and a pocket New Testament. And they were well received. They were happy to get those. We also contacted the schools. We were able to go to 10 different schools. And we left 177 dozen totem poles for the teachers and the staff there. But we were not allowed to give them Bibles. So maybe one day that'll change as well. But for now, that's the way it stands, I guess. So I want to remind you that all the money given to you by this ministry goes to publishing and distributing Bibles. We take up collections from our membership for special events that I just told you about. We So every cent you give goes towards publishing and distributing Bibles. And so we know times are tough, money is tight, so we ask as your heart leads, souls are precious, we need to reach them. Leave us not only the back. As you leave today, to take up whatever offering that you might have for us. And if you're not prepared with checks and so forth, we have envelopes in the back that are self-addressed to Gideon Ministry. If you'd like a pocket Bible, I got some out in the truck for your own personal witnessing. There's Romans 8:28, and we know all things that work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. I want to thank the pastor and you folks for being tolerant here and let me come up here and tell you a little bit about our ministry. And I will tell you that this past year we did, in spite of all this, we still distributed almost 66 million Bibles this past year. That's about 2 Bibles every second. Since we started handing out Bibles and placing them in 1908, we placed over 2,400,000,000 Bibles. So with that, I'll get out of here. We'll see you in the back when you leave today. Thank you very much. And
So still, impressive numbers. The Lord is at work in the Gideons. Now, as Jake said, after the service, we'll have some folks back there to collect an offering if you are so led to give. Otherwise, Jake has got envelopes, and I'm sure there's many other ways that you can help stand alongside this ministry. And I believe I've talked long enough. Russel and Helen are ready. We're ready to receive the blessing you've got for us today.
The captive free, the only name
expresses our feeling about Jesus. How precious his name is. Today we're going to start a series of messages for the season of Lent entitled Woe or Wow. And really the choice is up to you. We're going to take a look at Matthew chapter 23. And in the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 22 and 23 are a kind of running battle between Jesus and his chief opponents, the teachers of the law and Pharisees. Now, it may have actually been Jesus who struck the first blow in this battle. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, verse 20, in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said these words, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." And I imagine when they heard that, they assumed that there wasn't any righteousness greater than theirs, and took offense at it. So we're going to, in these messages, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the 7 woes that Jesus pronounced on these people who made themselves to be his enemies. And then, on the other hand, we're going to contrast those woes with its opposite virtue. And so, all through this Lenten season, our aim is going to be to avoid the sin of hypocrisy and to seek out a godly virtue as its opposite. Now, hypocrisy is one of those sins that's easier to identify in others, isn't it? But we need to, during this Lenten season, especially take stock of our own inner life, our own spirituality. What we're going to see in the contrast today is that God has commissioned every believer, every child of his, to invite people to join the kingdom, not to keep them out. God has commissioned us to be inviters. So, Matthew 23, if you will, please, and verse 13. Here is the first of the woes. "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are." With the words of that stinging rebuke in our ears, let us also listen for the voice of the Spirit who speaks truth to us. In the Bible, that word woe can be a compassionate word. It can mean, alas, I feel so bad for you. Or it can mean woe as in watch out, or maybe a mix of the two. But I think in Matthew 23, it's very clear to us that Jesus intends the watch out meaning as he speaks to the teachers of the law and Pharisees. Now, looking here at Matthew's Gospel, chapter 23, we're going to notice this truth. Woe to those who keep others out of the kingdom. We have read Jesus' first woe in verse 13, and it is woe to those who shut the door of heaven in people's faces. Now, this refers to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law actively opposing Jesus. He says, you shut the kingdom of heaven. You shut the door and to keep men out. Jesus came to his own Jewish people first to be received as their Messiah. But what happened instead was leaders like these teachers of the law and Pharisees rejected Jesus' claim to be the Messiah and actively worked against him. He said, in fact, "You yourselves do not enter." There's the door. He says, "You refuse to enter, and nor will you allow anyone else to enter." People who are honestly seeking the kingdom of God, you distract them, you discourage them, you deter them from entering in. Now, it's bad enough that they had chosen not to accept Jesus as the Messiah, but they compounded their sin when they actively tried to get others to deny him as well. So that's the first woe there in verse 13. The second woe is in verse 15. And here Jesus is saying, "Woe to those who have a zeal that does more harm than good." Those whose zealousness does more harm than good. Now, zeal, as we've talked about, is a good thing if it comes from the Lord and if it's directed at God's glory and establishing God's kingdom. And one of the big biblical examples of zeal is Jesus going into the temple and clearing out those who were doing bad business there. But in this case, their zeal and their use of their influence was misguided. Now, history shows us that the period from 1 to 72 AD was a period of great expansion of the Jewish faith. The Roman government had decided that the Jewish faith was a legal religion, and for whatever set of reasons gave them a lot of latitude that they did not give other faiths in the empire. And so the Jewish people were free to disseminate their faith and to make converts all over the ancient world. And as history shows us, they had some success in doing so. But Jesus did not exaggerate very much when describing their effort to win a single convert. He said, "You go over land and sea to win a single convert." But then once they had him, their zeal did them more harm than good. In fact, Jesus said, "You make him twice as much a son of hell as you are." Now those are strong words. But what Jesus is referring to here is that new converts were made to be even greater slaves to legalism than the teachers of the law and the Pharisees themselves practiced. And also here Jesus is referring to the fact that all falsehood has its origin in Satan. John 8:44. Satan is the father of all lies. And so he's not really resorting to much hyperbole when he calls them a son of hell. So here's our two woes in Matthew's gospel. Now let's turn and see the virtue that we need to replace that vice of keeping people out of God's kingdom. John chapter 1, verses 43 to 51 gives us a couple of examples of people who were inviters. Woe to those who exclude, but blessings upon those who invite. Let's look at that. John 1, starting with verse 43. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nazareth. Can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. Come and see, said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, Here is a true Israelite, in whom there is nothing false. How do you know me? Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree, before Philip called you. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus said, You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You shall see greater things than that. Then he added, I tell you the truth. You will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Here we see Jesus and Philip both as examples of inviters. Look at verses 44 and 45. Philip is an example to us of an inviter. Philip invited Nathanael to come and see. Now, that's a pretty simple invitation, isn't it? You could say, you ought to come to church with me. Come and see what happens. You don't have to make any promises. You don't have to have a pitch. Just come and see. Come with me to Jesus and see what he has done. You see, Philip's approach was positive, and Nathanael's response was curiosity. Come and see. He doesn't, as I say, tell you very much, but it did, in this case, provoke Nathanael's curiosity. And even though he was curious to a degree, Nathanael in verse 46 expressed some skepticism about the town of Nazareth. You see, both Philip and Nathanael came from a town called Bethsaida, which was located in Galilee, the same province as Nazareth. So it's possible that Nathanael was talking smack here because of a town rivalry. You know, when I was growing up and in high school, our big rival was Mitchell. So I can picture myself saying, Mitchell, can anything good come from there? Same kind of thing. The word good here that Nathanael uses refers to a person of high worth and merit. So he's skeptical that anything or anyone like that could have come from a place like Nazareth, thank you very much. But he came anyway. He was invited. And friends, when we're dealing with people who are unchurched, a great number of them are unchurched because they have never been invited. It's that simple. It really is. Let's notice Jesus as the example of an inviter. Starting with verse 43, where he invites Philip. And what does he say to Philip? 2 words. Follow me. Well, not a lot of content there either, is there? A very simple invitation. Come along, Philip. Jesus' approach to Nathanael, on the other hand, starting in verse 46, was to reveal God's power and promise. Nathanael revealed God's power, or Jesus revealed this to Nathanael. And Nathanael's response to that was to believe in Jesus. Now, in the original language, Jesus' words to Nathanael about being a true Israelite in whom there nothing false, that's a play on words. So Jesus is giving Nathanael a very friendly greeting, having a little bit of fun, and drawing him into the conversation. And then when Nathanael responds to that with his skepticism again, how do you know me? I don't know you. How do you know me? Jesus says, I saw you. I saw you under the fig tree when Nathanael approached you. Now, in the culture of the day, Jews like Nathanael would sit under a tree to do their praying, to do their meditating. It's a hot climate. Fig trees provide a lot of good shade, and they have lower branches so you can get in underneath there and have a good deal of privacy while you're talking to the Lord. However you explain it, Jesus knew something about Nathanael that someone who just met him shouldn't have known. And that clicked with Nathanael. Jesus demonstrated a knowledge of Nathanael as a person, but then a knowledge of Nathanael's circumstance. And both of those things were things that he had no earthly means of knowing. And Nathanael responds with two expressions of faith. Now, the first was to refer to Jesus as rabbi, and that was a pretty common term for a teacher, so no big deal here. But then he uses two titles that would only be appropriate in reference to the Messiah, God's promised one. He referred to Jesus as the Son of God, and to Jesus as the King of Israel. Jesus accepted Nathanael's faith and then gave him something extra, a promise of things to come. And look at what Jesus says there in verse 51. You will see heaven open. Now, friends, prior to this moment in the history of the Jewish people, there had been 400 years of silence from heaven. Heaven had been closed until John the Baptist came along. There were no new prophets. There was no word from God. There was no further written revelation from God. Heaven was closed, and Jesus said, Nathanael, I accept what you say is true. I accept the faith that you have demonstrated to me. And now let me tell you something. You, Nathanael, will see heaven open. Wow. And then in a vision, in a scene that would have reminded Nathanael of Jacob way back in Genesis 28, seeing a ladder that extended from heaven to earth with angels going up and down it. Jesus said, you're going to see angels ascending and descending. But there's no ladder this time. He said, you're going to see them ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Let's not lose that little word on. Jesus replaced the ladder in Jacob's vision. He became the focal point. He became the means by which the resources of heaven were now open to people who would dwell upon the earth. He became the focal point and the center of human history. And he said, Nathanael, you're going to see all of this. You see, God has commissioned you and I to invite people to see that heaven is open. God has commissioned you and I to invite people to Jesus, who is the means by which the angels are ascending and descending. And we are not to keep them out. You know, it would be a fairly easy thing for any one of us to say how many people we have brought into the church, how many people we have influenced as family member or friend, how many people who were baptized because we had invited them. It would be awful hard for us to come up with a figure of how many we've kept out. Because of hypocrisy, because of whatever we may have done. Jesus is calling us to raise that number of invitations. Simple thing. I'm going to church. Want to come? I'm going to pray to Jesus now. You want to pray with me? And in these very simple means, to make an invitation. Now, I want to close by telling you about a new preacher who arrived in a small town. He got into town on Monday and wisely spent the remainder of the week calling upon the members of his new church and inviting them, giving each of them a special invitation to attend church on Sunday. It's going to be his first Sunday in the pulpit. You can imagine his disappointment when, after all of that work, the following Sunday the church was all but empty. Well, he got an idea in his head, and the next day the pastor placed an ad in the local newspaper that said that the church was dead and it ought to have a decent burial. And the burial service would be the following Sunday. Well, that aroused a lot of morbid curiosity, as you can imagine. And a large crowd turned out for the funeral service of the church. And when they arrived, they saw that there was a coffin in the front, and it was decked out with flowers, and the lid was shut. And after the pastor delivered the eulogy, he opened up the coffin and invited people to come forward and pay their final respects to the dead church. Well, this aroused their curiosity even further. And so there was a line in the aisle of people who wanted to see what he could have in that coffin that would portray the corpse of the church. And one by one, as they went and looked inside, they would turn around with kind of a sheepish, guilty look on their faces. And one by one would find out that inside the coffin, the preacher had placed a mirror. Now that's a long way to go to make a point, isn't it? Let the same be said of us. We are not ever a reason to keep anyone out of this church. But instead, every day, every way we can, we are inviting people. Now, James is going to come around to you as we conclude our service today, and he's going to give you a paper. A paper that has just a little form for you to use in keeping track of your invitations. And this piece of paper, there it is, will ask you to look around the sanctuary. Do you see somebody missing? Then you would write down their name, how you can contact them, the date that you contacted them, and the result of your contact. You do that also for your neighborhood. Walk around your neighborhood. Is there anybody who lives near you that doesn't attend church? Write down their name, how you can contact them, when you contacted them, and what happened. And then the same for your home. Now, friends, nobody's going to take, this isn't a test, okay? I'm not going to ask for this back, but in each of these little boxes, I do ask the question, is there anything you can tell me? So when you make these contacts, when you make these invitations, if there's a special need that I could help with, if there's someone who would like a visit, you and I could go see them together, anything that I can do to help stand alongside you as you make your invitation, let me know. Not necessarily with this form, but certainly by any means. Give me a contact, and I'll be happy to stand alongside you. I'm providing this to you just as a very simple mechanism for you to get organized. I think we all have sentiment. We We all say, yeah, I wish I would invite more people. But then when it comes to doing it, it's kind of hard to think of somebody, isn't it? Well, ask the Lord. Use this little form if it helps you. Let's work together. Amen? I'm going to invite you to take your bulletin or your hymnal and turn to 482. Who is the big inviter? Jesus is the big inviter. But we stand alongside him as we make invitations. Jesus is calling. 482. Would you stand, please? Remember the person who invited you to Christ. Go and do likewise. Amen.